Morning, good evening, depending on where you are joining us from here today. Thank you for joining our weekly podcast interview for the Transformation Ground Control podcast. Today's topic is ERP software, the history and future of the ERP software space. Thank you for joining here today. I'm going to introduce our guest here in just a moment, who I'm very excited to have on the show here today. I've never interviewed him before, or even met him until today, so I'm very excited to have a conversation here, and I'm excited to have the audience join in as well. Just a couple quick logistical things before I introduce our esteemed guest here. First of all, my name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation and ERP journeys. We do digital strategy, software selection, as well as implementation related services. So you can always reach out to me if you have questions about what we do as a firm. Secondly, as I mentioned, this is a weekly live podcast interview that we do every week. And we actually use this live interview and edit it and add more content to it and make it part of our weekly Transformation Ground Control podcast, which is released every Wednesday. So you can find this interview a week from tomorrow on our Transformation Ground Control podcast. And you can find our podcast at transformationgroundcontrol.com. So if you want to see this episode when it comes out, or any of our 160 plus past episodes, just go to transformationgroundcontrol.com and you'll find that there. Lastly, before we introduce our guest, I'd also like to mention that we are taking audience questions here. So I love getting audience engagement and questions. And this is a really unique opportunity to ask a question of someone who really pioneered the ERP software industry. So I highly encourage people to ask questions and comments along the way. I consider this a pretty rare opportunity to meet with someone of this stature here in a moment. And there was one last thing I was going to mention. Lastly, you can drop any questions you have in the chat. So just drop those at any point along the way. And speaking of the chat, if you don't mind just dropping in the chat what city and country you're joining from today. I myself am in the United States. My guest is in the Netherlands. So we're across continents here, and love to hear where everyone here is from as well today. So with that all being said, topic today, ERP software, the history and future, with the founder of Baan Software. One of the original ERP software vendors and solutions in the ERP space as we know it today. Jan Baan, thank you for being here today.
My pleasure, Eric. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. It's amazing that you and I have never had an interview after all this time. We've both been in the space for a long time, and this is the first chance we've had to have an interview. So I'll be honest, I'm honored to have you on the show, and you're sort of a legend in the ERP software space. And I have to share a couple quick stories, if you don't mind, real quick, before I ask you to introduce yourself a little bit more, Jan. But for the audience's sake, a couple quick things. First of all, when I was in graduate school, I had a professor who was obsessed with Baan. He'd always talk about Baan. He would actually demo Baan for us in our classes to show us what Baan could do and how it related to operational improvement and business process improvement and automation. And this is back in the 90s, of course, and Baan was obviously a very prominent system at the time. So Baan was actually the first ERP system that I ever heard of and was at all familiar with. So that's why it's even more exciting to have you here on the show, because I've known about Baan since I first learned about ERP. So that is an honor. And then secondly, I have to share this with the audience. As we were preparing for this interview, just in the 15 minutes before Jan came on the show here today, we were just talking, kind of preparing the questions, and I learned a ton of stuff just in that prep conversation. So I'm very excited. I think you're going to learn a lot from Jan here today. So please ask any questions you have. So with that all being said, I know that's a long preamble, Jan, but if you don't mind, maybe just tell us about yourself. Tell us a little bit about you and your background.
I'm 77 years old and traveling long on the 45 years on the enterprise journey, and starting Baan from scratch, being 20 years there. And then I quit because I came to the conclusion after 20 years with 5,000 people that I felt a little bit obsolete, because everything we built was not built for the browser. And I quit, and I call it burn my shifts behind me, start again. And I invested my money in the cloud. And we built with a BPM, business process management layer. I invested in WebEx and top tier $100 million of dollars. And I saw that a little first in the slipstream of Baan. But then I learned that disruptive innovation has no chance in an institute. And I'm being more an entrepreneur than an investor. I need fun. And always I traveled on roads where no one was before me. And I started again in BPM, and we built end-to-end processes. But BPM was too complicated. Even for the CIOs, they did not understand it real, but I learned a lot. And then I quit again. BPM, my chorus company became part of OpenText, and I focus in what we call the knowledge worker. The API is connecting the dots. Maybe in BPM, the browser is connecting the dots. But now you go to API, and then you go to what we call big data, machine learning, the containerization, the microservices. And you do it no longer for the enterprise, because the enterprise moved downstream from the silo to the processes on the internet. And now you go to Internet 2.0, 3.0, to the knowledge worker for the job to be done. Now, that's more my journey.
That's very interesting. So I have to ask you this, just as sort of a one of the things you said that's very interesting is you said that you left Baan and sort of burned the ships behind you. When was this that you left Baan? This was in the late 1998. So 1998, you leave Baan, and part of your concern was that it wasn't cloud-based or internet-based, and you wanted to create something that was web-based.
Yeah.
And just put it in context for those that may not remember this, but 1998, the cloud was not, that wasn't a thing. That wasn't as widely accepted as it is today. How did you know, or why did you think at the time that the cloud would become limited?
I was an early bird in WebEx. There was no one. WebEx was a small company, Silicon Valley. I helped them in the IPO process. I invested 50 million, 60 million, later on more, and I allowed them to do a freemium. And even Zoom was not there when I invested in WebEx, because they sold it to Cisco, and then Eric came from there and started Zoom. Now, I was the early bird there, and I saw WebEx as a business tool, as more a tool to see the web meeting as a war room for the business. That was my drive. And then I learned, and in Baan, I see what you see when a company, I was on that moment, when we did IPO, I had 60%. But on the moment, I maybe the biggest shareholder, but still 35% or so. But I have a board and management. But management, in my opinion, I've given them too much freedom. They moved more from customer intimacy to M&A, and I should say more filling the pockets with selling divested shares. That is, I make my mistake from in the beginning, focusing on customer intimacy, and too much I was naive and let them go in what I call shareholders value. But then I learned shareholders, there are no shareholders, because I did not understand them. You should call them share movers, because no one is holding. And it's a problem. I was so naive, I was thinking these people are for life with me, but no, they're gambling with you. Now, and that's the element, the challenge with the VCs, etc., is kind of real, not so attractive for the disruptive innovation. And therefore I quit. And with my WebEx knowledge and top tier knowledge. Top tier was the first XML portal. Later on, I sold it to SAP. We sold it for 400 million to SAP to replace their NetWeaver. And it was also tremendous technology. I was founded already, but I saw it was not complete enough. And it was not consumerized enough. And then we moved what we today see, like the REST API, like infrastructure as a service, like what you see in a Google, in an Amazon, etc. Now, the middleware layer for ERP is thinking, I'm saying often. It's not, it's architectural, done by the knowledge of the last century of ERP, but not done with a native cloud. Now, that's what I learned. To start again in the cloud, you have to do a totally other way of thinking than in on-premise transactional ERP.
Right.
And realize, Eric, everything is stored in the transaction and is stored in concrete. Now, in BPM, the rules were already decoupled, and 1 second before the transaction you could change the rules. Now, in MRP, it's too much stored in concrete. And you have no choice. I put the process through your throat.
Right.
That was the biggest, limitation. Is it on ERP? But so far good enough if it is backend, but not good enough if it goes downstream.
Right. That's very interesting. I wish I could say that back in 1998, I too predicted the advent of the cloud, but I did not. I was still trying to figure out what ERP software was.
I worked with the guys of I2 also, but they were more on the rule engines.
Right. Interesting. So what about What about Vanderburg, the company you founded? You're CEO of a company called Vanderburg right now. What can you tell us about Vanderburg and what are you up to these days?
Vandenburg, in Vandenburg, I had a castle of Vandenburg. It was my also my holding company. But then in the mid of when I started BPM, we had this BPM layer, and I had even another investor in it. But I invested something new, what we call the beginning of microservices, and we built it already in the mid 90s, say in 2005 or so anywhere. And then my board was a little obsolete, a little afraid in what we did. And I decided that, okay, let me take it again. And I bought it private back. And I called it to my castle and therefore I call it Vandenburg. And it was my third startup after BPM. We moved then to the second part of the internet.
Right, right.
And that was the beginning even of the workflow. Because in Cordis, I built silos. Sorry, in Baan, I built silos. In Cordis, I built processes to the inbound enterprise, but there is no supply chain. Even today, there's no supply chain because you are not collaborative, you're not dynamic. Now, then we moved to the workflow, and that's a part of the supply chain, to the collaborative workflow.
Interesting. So when you say you built silos at Baan, are you talking about modules? Like it was a modular system?
Yeah, we did it already nice, but the problem is the good thing is we have a unique point where no one came there. We had a custom order decouple point, and in the custom order decouple point, you could decouple everything, every type of engine need to order, make to stock, and we decoupled it after the warehouse layer on the latest moment. No one did it before. That have given the Baan the unique element, and we had our dynamic enterprise modeling where you did even the implementation stuff on the same element. That was unique, and every component was decoupled, and we built our famous Baan shell. Now, the Baan shell is now still executing in Infor everything to the internet. That means in internet, maybe Infor is the only one who takes the same source code, the same functionality immediately in the cloud. Because they have not to replace the code. The code was executed with a Baan shell to CPU, called the CPU now the internet. It was database independent, and it was operating system independent, called the operating system now infrastructure as a service. And they were able to connect it to Amazon like they before connected to Unix.
Interesting.
And there is Infor is still amazing today. And simpler. If that's the reason I was amazed that my old Baan product is still in the top of the ERP. Now, and it is simpler than Oracle and then SAP to implement the complex variety of business processes in the enterprise.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It is amazing that the product is still around and a lot of companies still using Baan. And I know Infor has been supporting it now for some time now. So rewinding back to 1978, you said you started Baan?
Yeah.
So 1978, you start a company called Baan. Why did you start the
not
company?
Not Baan. I started a consulting company. I was a bookkeeper and maybe a controller. And then I came by accident in Silicon Valley in 81, 82. And I was selling already some microcomputers from a company called Durango in San Jose. And then I was the first one who sold this stuff what normally was used by toys, by Apple, etc. They used by toys. We use already an 8-bit 64K machine in multitasking multi-user in the 80s, in 82. Now, and then I came at home by the CEO of Durango, and the guy saying, I'm now going to Unix. I say, oh, then I have to go to Unix. And then we built our famous Baan shell from that moment. But it was always done on, I think, state-of-the-art technology. All my competitors like ASK were on minis. And we were the only one were on microcomputers, and then we adopted the microcomputers. We adopt Unix from the beginning. Like today, Linux, Unix. We never went in .NET. I see it. Unix was far more professional on it, and Unix have given us all the power to build this stuff like the Baan shell. Now, we were in tools like Progress, but we were not selling the tools. But the tools were integrated by the application developers. That was unique elements. Right. Then I moved to India, and our real success is that I was already in the mid-80s in India, and very soon I had 1,000 engineers, where 10 years later, no one was even there. SAP, Oracle, they were even in the first 10 years not in India. Now, then there I have in-depth technology with top people. I paid them extremely high salary, but it was in rupees, and I was selling the product in dollars and in euros. Now, and I trust them. That was also the other secret. The secret in Baan was that we were more an Indian company, and link them together.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I mean, another trend that you saw before the rest of the world did, which is very impressive. And along those lines, just a real quick diversion here. I want to turn to the audience and recognize, first of all, thank you to the audience and everyone who dropped in the chat where they're joining from today.
I see Dan is asking, what about the B-Bits? There's another element, the Baan Business School.
Right.
Dan was part of it. What I did already in the 90s, aligning IT and business, and we call it boundary spanners. And that was also another secret. There was a mini MBA where we call it these green beans, these youngsters were around the world. And we were able, they could do the pre-sales and implement this stuff. That was also another element they more also were instrumental for this dynamic enterprise modeling and all this stuff.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Very interesting. A lot of people joining from all over the world here today, everywhere from Spain, Switzerland, Spring, Texas, Kokan, India, USA, London, Ontario, someone else from the Netherlands, Paris, India, Hong Kong.
Okay.
So a lot of people from all over the world. Yeah, throughout the world. You're a world phenomenon, and people want to.
Yeah, now with you, be together.
Yeah, see, you and I together can get a good audience for sure. So one comment here that I think is worth noting here. I just lost it, so bear with me. There's so many comments coming in. I'm having trouble keeping up, but indomitable entrepreneur and a visionary. I totally agree with that. I think that you've already pointed out two things that or at least three things that you were far ahead of your time on.
If you allow me, I disagree with visionary. We have a saying in Dutch: vision is bullshit. You have to learn it. You have to learn it from mistakes. Always, I was traveling on roads whenever was before me. But then, what you do, you try to do it first time good, but never was doing. It's always failing. You throw it away, and that should be done more in IT. You throw it away and do it again. That means vision, is more learning from your mistakes. But some people say Jan Baan is learning faster than the competitor can make it. And that's the element. If you do it quick and fast, then you have time to do it again.
Right. Yeah. And make mistakes and learn from those mistakes.
And never do it too long, because the most problem you can have is source code. And what we did always, we throw it away, rebuild it for half the lines of source code with 2 times more functionality. That means I started with 3GL, moving to 4GL, event-driven 4GL with Triton, and we throw away all the times every module and rebuild it. And that is what we should do even today. It should be evergreen. Software should be permanently rebuilt on the new technology waves.
Right. Yeah. Very, very interesting. So what about, and there's a lot of questions coming in, by the way, Jan, about a bunch of things I'm going to get to here in a moment: composable ERP, AI, et cetera. So, but before I shift gears and talk about sort of the future of ERP, I want to come back and sort of finish the story here of how you've gotten to where you are today. If you look back at your time in the enterprise technology space so far, not just with Baan, but with the BPM company and now with Vanderburg, what are some of the biggest lessons that you have from the industry, and what might you do differently if you could go back and do it over again?
First of all, often you sometimes underestimate yourself, and too much I maybe have given authorization out of my hands and have given it in the hands of the managers. And they have a different view. I mentioned already, they're looking to the short term. And disruptive innovation sometimes takes you 10 years before you're there. And you have to be patient and do it this one. It's perseverance, not give up. And most go back, customer intimacy is the most important one. Focus and too much I make my mistakes and even allow them to go to shareholders value and all the other stuff, etc. If greed is drive you, and if it's only the money, then it's not joyful, but that is the most dangerous part in it. And we overestimate, because we are only down to earth, we are manufacturers. I learned what I do is a manufacturing process. and not so many people are doing it. I have the bill of material with all these components. I'm composing this one. I learned from Boeing and everything that I have to be like them, a manufacturer. Where I did decoupling, late binding, and all the manufacturing principles. I built it. I call it my own software factory. Now, and that is what we did in India. And again, learn again to go now more to UX and go more to user. In the beginning, we ignore too much the user. That's the problem. What we see with ERP, it's too much generic. My innovation is what you have to do, but now we move to mass customizing. To some elements, we make it generic, like a mobile, but on the same moment, it's becoming specific. And the power is, an enterprise should not be the same. Porter expected that with new technology we can be all different, but we all coming the same, like Fleming in SAP and use the same functionality. And there's no differentiator. Now, we should destroy this. And we should say, take only a generic part. Like in a car, some things are generic, but your dashboard is specific. And it's a decouple point and bring it there.
That's very interesting. So here's a question that sort of builds on something you just mentioned a moment ago, Jan. You were talking about how being a visionary is bullshit, and it's all about your experience and lessons from it. But maybe just building on that point a little bit. This is from Jan on LinkedIn. Jan asks, apart from experience, how do you predict well ahead? What are your sources? So maybe another way to frame that is, are there sort of like academic or just data sources you use in addition to your experience and your thought on what?
It's simple. Just be down to earth. Just do it fast, and do it again, and throw it away, and again pick it up. Because you cannot oversee it. And the problem is what people are doing. They all build it, and all these elements are in. But go there first. You have a feeling. Should you go north or south? You have to go north. But if you climb the mountain, you cannot see it. You have to build a camp again. And if you go left or the right, you correct. You have camps, you do something between. Now, what we did was extremely important, that also in our software factory, that we were able to give, no, let me say, you have the freedom to people. We were saying, I'm dealing with intelligent people. It is already a problem because they are not so easy to handle. Now, we learned, it's attitude of people. We learned how to make these people more innovative. That's one point. But then you have another point. If you have innovative people, they're sometimes introvert, or sometimes maybe you need a little autistical to understand it. With these kinds of people, you have to cross another border, which is not easy. You have to make them also more that they take initiatives. That's the biggest problem. And then people are afraid. They say, I have to ask my mother to do this. Say, you have not to ask your mother. You have not to ask your boss. Just do it. No. And what I did, I went to all the people say it is better to ask for forgiveness than for permission. Just do it. No, that means I've given all the guys all the authority in the small teams. And that was, and then the third element is important. Is it me? No, it should be integrity. And it means it should be not done for me, for the team. And then you have to also reward the team and share wealth with them, that they feel it's all for us. And then 1 and 1 is never 3. You Americans are always saying 1 and 1 is 3. I like to have 2, and you can have 1, and then you're problem. Now, 1 and 1, in my opinion, is 11.
What do you
and
mean
bring
by
it
that?
in. And it's only done. The core element is only the attitude. Give totally freedom to your people. Let them go. Don't ask. And then, and every moment they share it, and it's coming, because in the beginning you cannot oversee it. It's nonsense. Everything you like to do in a vision is all nonsense, because it's never reality.
Right.
But you learn so much for your customer. That means important is then the customer intimacy part. And even try to have the decoupling generic part and the specific, and then you learn again. Right. In my opinion, it's more the attitude than knowledge.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. You can always find smart people. You can always learn more. That's great, but it doesn't do you any good if you don't have the right attitude and the humble, the humility to learn from mistakes and that sort of thing. So those are great points. So just shifting gears a little bit, and I think you might have alluded to this answer or to this question already, but what are some of the ERP software and just general enterprise tech trends that you're most excited about right now, based on where we are in the industry here in 2024?
What we see important is still ERP I call it often the mother of all complexity. It became extremely complicated. And what is the limitation of ERP? It's done in one database, a relational database, with tens of thousands of tables. Sometimes SAP is maybe coming to 100,000 tables or so. It's becoming complicated. And then you increase it. Now, then we moved to end-to-end processes, and then you do it on the process layer. Now, what we now do is realize that in Kubernetes, in this containerization, you can build very small parts and unite them together. And it is done, and you can do it 100 times faster and better to do this type of stuff. But most people cannot oversee ERP. That's the problem. If you have the kids from Google, have no clue what ERP means. Now, therefore, you have ERP is a given. Okay, use it like the engine. If you see a new car, the engine is good enough. Therefore, today's ERP is good enough for another 10 years if you decouple it. But only take it vanilla, destroy it, take the bespoke out, and first start with the bespoke in microservice on the front end. Decouple that. When it is vanilla, you can implement it in 1 week for a new version. Now, you see now the Infor, etc., try to come like a Salesforce, every 3 months with a new version, like a kind of evergreen. Okay, when you decouple the bespoke, you adopt it again, and then it's good enough, and then sunset it step by step. And then you bring those processes, you have the most value downstream for the knowledge worker, do this. You make more money to optimize the downstream workflow than to increase the backend. The backend is good enough.
Right.
But the backend never could do UX. The ideal situation is by ERP that you have no user, one user. There is no UX needed in ERP. The UX part can be, what we say, late binding, can be done in the microservice 100 times better.
Right.
The middleware fits not. Now I learned that, and then okay, it's not so attractive. Now, if you go there, then you can be with maybe you could have an element. What we see, 2 elements: is ServiceNow on the one end, complicated stuff, and SAP the one end. Now maybe you can do it for 10% of the course with Infor and what we're doing together in this stuff. It's good enough. For a Boeing was already good enough. I mean, the functionality of the core master production scheduling is still the same. All those complex, all the source code is still the same. A product configurator is still the same. Now, but from the downstream element, let's say from the decouple point, when it is from a decoupled point going from generic to specific, then the whole project model, project control can be built in microservices. Now, I did it already for a tremendous big automotive company with 22,000 users. We built, as a Microsoft killer, we built in a couple of months a totally project module, and it's much simpler, where you bring everything, the invoice there, and then you offload it. They deal with 40,000 SAP users. Now, and then you decouple the project module and bring it more downstream. Now, this is the way of thinking, respect it, and then step by step sunset and decouple it.
Right. So I want to come back to that point in just a moment, but I also want to pull up a question that's a very good one that I think is perfect for you, Jan. This is from Kyler on LinkedIn. She says, Eric and Jan, is traditional ERP dying? What are your thoughts?
What is dying is refreshing. Let's first say, but ERP, because realize ERP is built in the first IT wave, is the wave of databases. Now, but ERP should belong to big data. Now, what I'm now doing, I'm not dying ERP, I'm optimizing a little. The old man I give them a car or so. That means immediately I take the database of ERP, immediately in BigQuery of Google. Now, that means, and then I can, but I have to go, but if you take a process out of ERP, most people do not understand it, you should be the finishing element back. Now, what we learned in BPM, if you take some things out of ERP, the result for the compliance part should be back. Now, there are principles, and then ERP can go another 10 years, but never do a big bang. Never. And then it brings also the complexity. But I cannot, I can't, we have the Dutch government, they spend $1 billion to replace an SAP system. Now, and if you see all these big companies, they pay hundreds of millions. Now, that is nonsense. It could be done for 10 times cheaper if you look to it, if you do it smart.
Yeah, it's interesting. So is what you're advocating then or suggesting is that ERP, we need to rethink what ERP is. So ERP, in other words, is a back office database transaction
administrative, kind of an administrative system.
Okay. Okay, so we're trying.
But it's complicated. If you go to the generic part, the biggest part we built was, say, master scheduling, but not so many people are using this. But all to have to understand all those elements, decoupling elements, it's good enough. Because ERP, the data, the latency of ERP, the data, if you have it once a day, it's good enough, but you should pick it as one version of the truth. And that's what people cannot do this. That means if you adopt the work from the front end, you should adopt maybe once a day or once a week an ERP run, a master scheduling. That's good enough. It makes no sense to have an ERP run every 5 minutes. Now,
Right.
you should have, but on the end, we take our IoT sensors and they are real time, and I take it in a microsecond. Now, and I do that in the workflow. That can be, if you do this in ERP, it's 1,000 times too complicated. That means inlaid binding, you never have to do this type of workflow elements. And let me say it this way, ERP is only handling a transactional element. But downstream, you have the human, and the human is not involved in ERP. Now, then downstream, you can take in, you have these state machines and do it. Now, do it downstream, then you take the human and you combine this one. It means if the flow, see it as a car, the engine is below, but you travel there more with anywhere, with Google, where to go there, and it's on your dashboard. And there you need it every second.
Right. So can you help us understand then, and this is something that you and I talked about prior to this interview, but the difference between microservices and composable systems? You pointed out that there's a distinction there. How would you summarize that distinction?
Some people say ERP is composing, can never be composing, because there's no human involved. ERP is only a transaction. And if you have no big data, you have even no version release control. You have only the data from yesterday, but not from half a year ago. In big data, you see all the other elements. And you never can make it composing. When you do it composing, you adapt it as the engine, and you do it on your dashboard in the microservices. But then you need dynamic semantical microservices, and then with Kubernetes, and then the big data is involved. Everything is Google providing me now. What I spent hundreds of millions in the last century, in the early days, to do it myself. Now you have to understand it. But it's all consumerized. The REST API is so much consumerized, or everything is here. It's so simple to do here. This consumerized. And this composing. And composing is not need in enterprise. Composing is always need by the job to be done.
Right.
See, if you do it too early, then you mislead people. Why should you compose when you work with 50 people in a factory, in a department? No, it means only when you sell or assemble the product. Now, composing is human.
Right.
And in that human composing element is downstream, is workflow. Right. And some people, they misunderstand the power of microservices. They are strong. The tools in microservices are by 100 times stronger than the tools I built in ERP in the 90s. I mean, I can easily build a complete ERP system in a year time. But why should I do it? I can make much more money to let ERP stay in the backend because it's not so improving there so much, and edit it to the front end. ERP is good enough where it is today. It's people understand the processes. Yeah, they're not changing it.
Right.
But over time, when we go to say 3D printing, but that failed, then you need no ERP. You need only PDM. But maybe over time, and what we did, we learned ERP and PDM. Maybe PDM is becoming more important than ERP to link the design. But you need in the microservice, I have to bring everything together.
Right. Yeah, that's super interesting, and that's something I think is hard to understand in our space because the software vendors love buzzwords, and so do the industry analysts, and so they'll use words like composable, microservices, and I hear those used somewhat interchangeably at times, and I think that's it helps to understand that difference.
And Erik, also, you know even more than I know that only few people understand ERP. Even for a CIO, it's hard to understand the processes of ERP. They are sometimes more CPO, is a chief procurement officer, than chief innovation officer, and that is more the problem. And over time, IT will disappear and will be part of the business. Yeah. And what I'm doing now, I'm dealing with the business owner and with the business analyst. Immediately, I can generate already 70 or 80% source code in Java. That's what we do in our rapid tools. That means aligning IT and business is the core element.
Right. That's very interesting.
And maybe the business engineer only understand the spreadsheet, but they can use the rules already in the spreadsheet. That means, and if I can, not with the program, but with the tools, adopt these rules already, then even I have not to come over 6 months back. No, the business owner engineers is already responsible for the rules. And other times IT did not understand. Coming back, there were the problems in the past.
Right.
You have
That's
to.
very interesting.
The only element what you have to do is to simplify.
Yeah. Yeah. And it seems like too, a lot of organizations are stuck in the patterns of the past. So in other words, I have an old ERP system, so therefore I need to replace my ERP system. That's the mentality you hear.
Yeah.
Back to your point about chief procurement officer, I
It
think
was nice. Ellen van Gassan, they say, will Baan be eventually phased out and merged into Infor? No, I can call it again Baan. My name is Baan. And maybe even we can merge again. I'm still Baan, and I have the right to say Baan, but could be maybe a good suggestion. But okay,
right.
A little joke.
Yeah. Right. That's a great point and question. I was going to show that, and I'm having trouble. There it is. Yeah. Thank you, Gassan. Great question there. I have another question that's sort of building on what you just were saying, Jan. I'm going to go find it here in a moment. And this is from Cyprian. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. On LinkedIn says, what are the key differences between today's ERP and those from both your era, the 1990s? And I know you've already talked about microservices and cloud.
The difference between the ERP is nothing. And when ERP is going to the cloud, is pseudo cloud. Realize that the same source code, and even as a problem, even today, most vendors have less functionality in the cloud than on premise. And the core and 80%, 70% of the core elements are built in the 90s and the 80s, and are still the same. Because the people today do not understand the source code to do this one therein. That's the biggest problem. And therefore we have to deal with it. But the good stuff is you see the input and the output, and with big data, if you take the data with big data, if you adopt, there are some things like the containerization, and if you bring AI on it, then you bring end to end from ERP to the knowledge worker, what it makes sense. Today, ChatGPT, etc., like Microsoft, they have 10 petabytes of data, but only unstructured, and they have no clue what ERP means. All the ERP data is hidden for ChatGPT. Therefore, it has no meaning. And we overvalue too much AI on this moment as only a suggestion for maybe a lawyer or so or some things, but not for an engineer on this moment. We have to be serious, and there's some things to do.
Well, I appreciate the fact that you mentioned something I always say, but I get a lot of criticism for, which is the functionality of cloud ERP systems is not as strong and doesn't have the same functionality as some of the on-premise legacy systems. I say that, and software vendors don't like when I say it. I'm not selling software, so I could just say what I think.
But Erik, let's do then from the ERP part, because the ERP part is done with the architectural view, because they're locked in from the 90s. But if I'm looking where I'm building application in Google, they are by far stronger to build every type of application. But the knowledge to do this is most times not available there. That means the best people of Google are smarter in gaming and all these other elements.
Right.
But if you use the same tools, you can make a 5 times stronger ERP. But ERP is good enough if you bring it to the end-to-end process, to the workflow. I should say, guys, you all can make a fortune of money and a best tremendous element for manufacturing companies if you connect the chain. And if we simplify the ERP part, take the customization out, and then even connect other stuff like BPM, do nothing with IoT, do it on the latest moment. If you talk machine to machine, the operator need a tool in the workflow and not an ERP. Now, if you make then a mistake, all these people are building in BAPIs. BAPIs, what is this? Now, you have to be very old and people to do this. Now, there is nonsense to do this. You should go take then Java and take then elements in a front end stuff. But when it is done, always every product, even in a Tesla car, you have 3 technology waves. You have still material, you have electronical, you have software. Now, there's nothing wrong with ERP. It's maybe the old, is maybe the engineering. But if you see it as different technology waves in one solution and decouple them.
Right. Now, what about this? Here's a great question from Graham on YouTube. Graham says, I'm a little confused regarding Jan's comments on composable. Can he comment on how best of breed solutions such as Coupa are replacing OEM functionality such as SAP assets? So maybe, how is best of breed different from the other two things, composable?
We always did best of breed. And what is best of breed is like a car, is an element of decoupling. It's like a bill of material where you have many layers. See, the same as a bill of material with many layers. And on the latest layer, you do also more the human part of it. But the best of breed is a best of breed of open source components. Now, many are gathered together with Amazon or with Google, but you have to understand all the other elements. Now, they are all. Then we see then that infrastructure as a service is a beautiful layer. Why should you reinvent that? Accept this one. But do then everything in the consumerized layer over there. And then you see the decouple point. But it's best of breed for me. It's also, you need a PLM system in a different way. You need other CRM system in a different way. But the problem is they have all the same data structure, more or less. Our data from a customer is 100 times stored in all the silos. No, that's nonsense. And they're all architected in the old way from one database. If you really understand the power of Kubernetes, and then you can do it in very small components, link them together and do the specific ones in every area. My grandchildren are building a show full with Lego in one day with all the modern stuff therein. See it like Lego. And integrate them. And then best of breed is only assembling. And take care that you never have a vendor lock-in. And that you care that you can replace one component tomorrow with another component, because that is changing.
Right. Yeah, that's really interesting. The vendor lock-in is a real risk and a problem, especially when you go back to the procurement comment you made earlier. But
that's the problem. There are people making money, you have no chance. Now, and that is nonsense. What we do, we generate everything without a vendor lock-in in plain Java. It is so stupid, but you're locked in. Why are you locked in? These ecosystems from these big ones, these monsters are so big, they're not growing in revenue. They're only growing in EBITDA and in market cap. Why should you pay for, say, 2,000 billion market cap and all this stuff and this old stuff there? Now, look a little fresh, and then best of breed, you can do much more other things.
Right. Here's a thought or a question about the future. Again, this is from Jan on LinkedIn. I'm curious to hear what you think of this too, Jan. But do you think small, innovative ERP producers will win against the larger ones like Microsoft D365, Oracle, SAP, et cetera, in the long term due to faster, flexible ERP modules? And I guess I asked that too in the context of you've been through this before. You built a great product that then got acquired by Infor, which became part of a big machine, a big software vendor. Do you think that cycle will continue to where you get these small innovative companies that eventually get bought up and become part of that vendor lock-in that you talk about?
Yeah, but the problem is by the enterprise. The people are too much afraid. Mother may I. I'm not fired by IBM in the past. I'm not fired by SAP, and it means no risk in it. And we all are there, and we all are afraid to do some things. No one is eager to understand it. The CIOs are so afraid, on average, to understand this one because it's new. I don't know what it means. There is a lack of knowledge. It's so simple, but they're all locked in this old world. That's the problem. And if you look to other products, you see small products, small companies, they do a lot. It should be better than to have one company with 1,000 billion market cap. It's maybe to have 1,000 unicorns around the world. Then you have 1,000 times more innovation. Now, but Nasdaq does and Wall Street does not like this one because they make the most money in these few ones. You see only the investments going 60% to 5 companies therein. Now, there is people are much too looking to save, because they're only looking to next quarter.
Yeah,
that's the biggest problem. Afraid to it.
Right. That's very interesting.
The question: how is rapid developer tool different from low code, no code? Now, let me share there some things. Low code is not the beginning of the end of it. There's a big limitation in low code. You cannot build ERP because you cannot do the last mile. And there's a problem with low code. You do very rapid technology for winning the POC, but the last mile cannot be done, and you're limited, and you go back to your SAP system. You need not low code, you need smart code. And what we do, let me compare it a little to autonomous cars. we expected already that the cars are autonomous, but still you need a steering wheel on the last moment. The same what we do, you generate a lot, but the perfect is the enemy of the good. On the last moment, you do it by hand. You need a tool that you can finish by hand. And this is the last element. Now, this combination should always be there. And I think that is the element that low code is more promising than it is in reality, because you often see that you cannot do the last mile and then you're stuck. And you are isolated in another runtime version dependent from your SAP systems, especially. I like more to be everything in one infrastructure as a service than again to isolate this stuff therein.
Right. Yeah, very interesting. What about one thing that you've spoken about in the past and that you and I talked about a little bit before we did this interview was infrastructure as a service and platform as a service. So IaaS and PaaS. What can you tell us about that and how it fits into the overall trends in the industry right now?
I see platform as a service like Silver, etc., is becoming already a little obsolete in my opinion, because it was the first stage of the internet. It's still like a transactional driven system. Amazing, you see everything in the cloud. The multi-tenant stuff and all the stuff are good, but you see still, why is it that Salesforce did not rebuild everything in an ERP solution therein? You see a little the limitation in platform as a service. Now, and then see platform as a service more replaced by microservices. And infrastructure cares now for everything in the cloud. Now, platform as a service was more a mix. You have to deal everything your own cloud, have your private cloud, bring everything there together. Now, I have no problem with the guidance. Let the guidance be there in infrastructure as a service, but that you have still a choice, that you are not locked in, that you are also there a little agnostic to what's going on there, but that you control it. And the business should control this stuff therein. And I'm more interested to build there in what we call this micro, but not so many people understand microservices. That you can link all stuff together, because you have to understand what is the element of BigQuery. How are you dealing with DevOps and all those elements? They are all composed in those elements. Now that's what we built in our rapid development platform. It took me 15 years to build that. After even I built Chorus. And throw away many times, but you focus more on those elements and you throw away all this infrastructure part. Do it not yourself. You never can do it better than an Amazon or especially Google. For me, it's Google favorite, by far better than everyone. They control the data, and I'm not so much in favor with Microsoft in .NET in these elements where I see this. I'm not so much liking Office and all the stuff from the part. But okay, that's maybe a little personally where we're going in.
Right. Now, that's a great clarification. Thank you for that. And here's a question that's a little different and something I think is worth hearing your opinion on here. This is from Moses on YouTube. Moses says, what's the outlook for Oracle and SAP ERPs? As a business system analyst supporting an Oracle cloud implementation, he's interested in cloud AWS, OCI, and SQL. How should he plan his career path? And maybe a general question would be, what technologies should younger tech people be learning at the time? What are those hot things that are going to be really useful?
You go there. Some people say fusion. I sometimes say confusion. But if you look to it, we came from the middleware layer. It's more an M&A strategy to take everything together. No one is coming out, and you see, but they are locked in, and they're controlling. They're making a margin. Some people say the mafia is less corrupt than these two ones because the mafia cannot make 90% margin. I saw that in the book, gross margin. They're making 90% gross margin from the maintenance. They say at your service, but on the same moment, they milk you. Now, you're milked in these monsters. And okay, maybe you need them if you logged in, but I should say try to escape. If you do some things therein, but first, if you limit it only to the vanilla part, then you are not locked in. Never, ever, never do a bespoke element in those tools. Use it only when it was corporate, when it was the decision. You have no choice to change that. The choice was for Oracle. It's maybe good enough to do this. SAP is also, everything is in, but big. But all the other elements are not integrated. If you look to procure to pay and all those elements are M&A components, but they show it on their say their price list as a totally integrated element. But it's nonsense.
Right. Now, do you think, aside from Oracle and SAP as specific vendors, are there certain technologies that you think are going to be the future that we should be focused on early in our careers?
I should more focus on downstream microservice element and give it for granted in ERP. And over time, something comes new or some new elements will come maybe over time, but it will take at least maybe another 10 years before this is mature. See it as a given. But more important is try to understand it. If you understand it, then you have gold. It's
Right.
better to understand the logic of ERP. Not so many people can do this. We need more people. It's not so sexy, but try to understand how ERP works. Then
Right.
you enjoy it as the whole manufacturing type of element, the whole how are we dealing with purchase, supply chain, and deal with this one.
Right.
Be more involved in the logic, how it works, and understand it. But it's all done with too much traditional elements. Now it moved to the cloud, but if it goes to the cloud, it's still in the same principles.
Right. Right. That's a great point. What about open source ERP systems? Does that help solve some of the problems or limitations of ERP systems?
I like, even if I look therein, what even going therein. Now I like Rootstock. I know the guys very much. It's done in like not so much done in Salesforce, but it's a good element also to see where it is close in some areas to the cloud and do some things. Open ERP is nice if you can use it, but then you have with open tools, the biggest problem is that service companies like it and they charge you more. Why should you make from elements a mobile yourself? It means in some elements, is it then mature enough? But no, in some cases, yes, it can be there. But we have seen that for most people, it was not reliable enough.
Yeah, and it's a lot to maintain too. It's a lot.
Exactly.
You sort of have you're at the
Why
behest of.
Yeah, if Infor makes it a little cheaper, maybe they can be king.
Right. Right. Another question here that I wanted to pull up is, I lost it. Actually, I'll go to one of the questions I had here for me from my list. Oh, it's AI. That's what it was. Someone was asking about AI and big data. What are your thoughts on AI and how does artificial intelligence fit into this whole trend of microservices and composable systems?
Very good. AI should belong on the latest moment brought in. We are making dynamic workflow apps who are based on big data. And we adopted all the underlying data end to end. And then we go to a workflow, and the workflow is driven by AI. And the AI is also in Google, where we see in Gemini, etc. Is all in the infrastructure service layer as more already as a composed tool, but also I should say as a productized tool. It's where you see it's all, let's say, productized in an extremely simple way. You can learn so quick this AI stuff on that moment. It's not rocket science longer more. That means in the beginning we were thinking with IBM and AI, and we need all these big people. No, you can learn it yourself, intuitive. No, this AI belongs in the microservice on the latest moment, because AI, you need it only when the human comes, because AI on its own is dangerous. AI should always be in the hand of the job to be done to execute. And what we do with this dynamic workflow, we facilitate with autopilot, how you call it, you facilitate the knowledge worker to do the job better. Now these knowledge workers have to figure out how these ERP systems are working. It should be the opposite. Peter Drucker expected that the knowledge worker can be twice more productive. We are making smart tools to improve the truck driver, to improve the front end, and you make the UI, the UX, especially for the knowledge worker, AI driven. And you give them suggestions like in a Tesla car, but on the end, the knowledge worker should drive. Right. AI always should be part of the execution of the knowledge worker, in my opinion.
Right. And not lost or buried in a back office ERP system.
And never do it in the back end, because it makes no sense. You need it not in the back end. If you see customer order decouple point, when what you built under the hood from a car is different than what you do on the dashboard.
Yeah.
AI is a tool on the dashboard.
Right.
And
You're not
You're not
working with
building in the
the
hood of the car, the hood of the car.
right. Yeah, great point. So here's a great question that just came in that's sort of tied to it, though. Why are we so focused on making the services micro? This is from Niles on LinkedIn.
Now, anyway, how we call it, who makes as a name, and what is a name? I should say what we've seen on the end is ERP was only bringing a product, but now the product becomes a service. And what is in the service? This is then you adopt everything from the product. If you go to a hospital, you see also what GE is building or Philips is making, then it's coming to the supply chain to the knowledge worker. And we call that a service. And I say, now, a service is more, in my opinion, when the human is involved. And their ERP is becoming more when the transaction when it's hidden. You have the in the bill of material is maybe the more the latest moment of the bill of material,
Right.
where you bring the service in.
Yeah, makes sense. So what advice for those listening that are in the ERP software industry or just the enterprise technology space, whether they're consultants or they work for a software vendor, what advice would you give to the overall industry for sort of how to navigate the present and the future?
First, try to understand how the factories are working and understand this one. And then only then you can change. No, people are now isolated, have no idea, and then understand end to end. And have colleagues where you can collaborate with this one. It's only small team. It's collaborative working that you understand, and then tools, and then common sense is even more important than tools. And then step by step you see you can improve, and then step by step you see that new technology can do much more. But today new technology is only used for simple products, for minimum viable products. But realize if you understand this, and then try to have a little architectural IT understanding. IT is becoming part of every business. Over time, we don't need longer IT. IT should be embedded in the business. We are not doing it for, let me say it this way. Suppose you have a company from $100 million revenue, mid-sized company, and they do $10 million in EBITDA. That means, okay, and they have $90 million operational cost. Now, in this company with IT, I can make only maybe 1.5%, is 1.5 million. And I can change a little. But Peter Drucker was saying, listen, this company is doing 90 million operating costs. Maybe 60% is human related. That's maybe 50 million. If Peter Drucker is right, we can do it with half the employees. 25 million can become to the EBITDA. That is tomorrow's world. Yeah. We are using IT only outside. If we use it inside, now we're trading some things you can ship it here in the same day, but the goods are already half a year in a box. That means, but if those elements are totally united together, all our business processes can be totally different. Now, that is in tomorrow's world. We are in the beginning of, say, enterprise improvement. We call it enterprise. I was maybe a little wrong. I say, okay, joking a little, ERP should not be E. It's not standing ERP because it's no enterprise. And reality is there is no enterprise for ERP. It's only departmental. It's only a silo. There is an enterprise, but then it's a collaborative enterprise. I should call it, we should build collaborative enterprise apps.
Right.
To collaborate the whole enterprise, and to collaborate you do only where humans are involved. When the human is not involved, you can have transactional elements therein.
Yeah. Now, and
therefore,
we have to rethink what it means.
Yeah, and I should say, those in ERP, you are in a lucky position because the glass is half full. Try to escape a little step by step, but try to improve. If you understand it, then you're king. And then you can even go step by step, is what can be sunset step, what can we use, and what can we build already outside. And people should have a little to dare to do this. People are so afraid. They are so introvert. Don't be afraid to be fired. Don't ask for permission. Just do it. Right. And if you do it, everyone will offer you a job.
Right.
Because there is so much to do there.
Right. Now, is that advice for the software vendors, or is that advice that you would also say is true for
the software vendors? You say the problem is a little is Wall Street and anywhere filling now my pockets and what means it and log in. It's not so attractive to change your model when you have this great do no innovation. That is what Clayton Christensen mentioned. We go from predictable innovation to efficient innovation, do it with half the people and milking the cow. And we are not going to disruptive innovation. because that takes 10 years, and I'm the CEO of a company, and over 10 years, my second follower is there, and I have no benefit. I have only benefit from the vested shares now. The problem is, the top CIOs, why should a person, by the way, make 100 million as an employee in it? But anyway, those guys making extremely big money only from the vested shares tomorrow. And they never will replace ERP. Why should they do this one? Because we should more open for disruptive innovation.
Right. What about for buyers of technology, people that are the CIOs or project team members that are evaluating potential technology options for their organizations? What should they know, or what advice would you give?
We know we cannot do the big things, but why are you not doing small proof of concepts and do it with young kids and say, make only small microservices and prove it. And it's only small ones, and those people can make career in these elements and decouple that a little, and do it with people who dare to take risk and to do some things. The better is sometimes youngsters, and the senior will guide them a little, and let the rest let it stay. Don't disturb it, because then you have a war. You have there's so much politics if you look to all these layers, and everyone is involved in these money making machines.
Right.
Now, be not slave of that system. Try to be a little innovative and do it small. Think big, execute small, and very quick. And what we do often, you do in 2 weeks, 3 weeks already. You make a service, and then again do it.
Right. Now, another follow-up question along those lines, just as sort of a way to close this out. You made the comment earlier that CIOs feel like they won't get fired, or no one ever got fired for hiring IBM or SAP. What advice would you give to that person that's afraid to do something other than bring on a big, proven, established ERP vendor that everyone knows, for better or for worse?
Now, I should say, first, you are too afraid to change because everyone is corporate and everyone is doing, okay, follow it a little, but investigate and do some small elements to prove. Maybe you can go to procure to pay. All those elements who are downstream, take those processes and understand a little microservices. That's the biggest problem also with the big ISVs. The big ISVs have also no understanding. They have thousands of people. They do it in India. They have slaves in India. They're milking the cow here. And they're all part in the system. They are not motivated to go to where you can do it with 2 people than with 200 people. Now, and I should say also expect not too much from these big ISVs. They are not daring. They're following, and they're all in this monopoly, locked-in solution. In my opinion, they are in danger.
Why is that, or what do you see happening there?
Yeah, if you see the extremely productivity with these microservices, compared to what you do in ABAP or so, or what you do in 3GL type of tools, and with also these tens of thousands databases and link them together, and what you do in Kubernetes or in these elements, it is a world of differentiation.
Right. And to your point, you get a lot of pressure from software vendors who want you to have lock-in because they benefit from that.
Fight to it. Don't accept lock-in. And by the way, you have perpetual license. You have license for life. If nothing changed, why should you pay maintenance?
Right.
If you can decouple it, you need only one user. You bring microservice of it, it's good enough. Now, Doc is better. We should be innovative, like an Infor or so. Maybe those people can understand manufacturing. They can be a little more together, innovative, to combine this type of stuff. They could have already a good starting point. And then I should say, ERP could also use in healthcare. The problem, healthcare is more worse. And if you understand automotive, you understand everything.
Right.
That means if you understand ERP from automotive, you can even go to healthcare. You can go everywhere. And those principles should even, because that is even more worse, even by the government. The ERP principles can even go further downstream in also this type of industries.
Right. Yeah, very interesting. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time here today. We are out of time, and honestly, my brain is full. I've learned so much in this conversation, my brain can't take anymore. So that's part of why we'll wrap it up here today. But I do, all kidding aside, I do appreciate you being here today. Really, it's a pleasure to interview you, and I love having you on. I'd love to have you again because I feel like there's a lot we didn't cover that we could still get to. So if you're ever up for it, I'd love to have you as a guest again in the future.
Thank you, Eric, and even the audience. I respect the audience. Nice to talk with all of you around the world, with all those friends where we see those who are in this world. It's good to have this community. Don't be afraid. Stay down to earth, and maybe it's more common sense, and it's not rocket science what we do.
Right.
It's not so complicated. Enjoy it, and at least enjoy the job what you're doing.
That's great closing advice, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate the audience with the great questions too. And I can tell from the questions and comments here that the audience loved this conversation. So thank you again for being here, Jan.
Welcome.
And, we'll see this. We'll edit this conversation. We'll add more content to it. It'll become part of our official podcast episode for Transformation Ground Control. It gets released a week from tomorrow, Wednesday of next week. You can go to transformationgroundcontrol.com to see or listen to all the past episodes of the show where we do lots of interviews like this. So we also do this live interview podcast format every Tuesday, same time, same place. We stream to LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. Today was the first time we streamed to Instagram, and soon we'll be streaming to TikTok as well. So thank you, everyone, for joining. Hope you all have a great week, and we will see you next time. Take care.